Welcome back to an episode of Spectator Mode. I'm Neil Strebig. With me, as always, is Donald Double D
Oh my
DeCray.
God, the energy.
I gotta like play him back and just see if my decibels ever change between the
No, I really think it's just like an automatic thing with you at this point. People are gonna think it's just the
yeah.
same intro every time. It's
So I have to
voiceover
wear
work.
different outfits. But no, we got a good lineup. Some sad news to start off with. Talk a little bit about Gilbert Gottfried. He passed this week, unfortunately. A legendary comedian. And then I think we'll have a little bit, happier news coming into the announcement of Kingdom Hearts 4. Talk a little bit World of Warcraft news, some Harry Potter news, which I know you're excited about.
Not excited, but
Uh,
yes, I love Harry Potter as a franchise.
and then talk a little bit about Oddworld Soulstorm, some interesting news out of that platformer. And then we're going to be closing on some meta news and some metaverse news with Facebook and Epic as well. We'll get to that when we get to it.
Yeah.
But I mean, first and foremost, basically just acknowledging the career and legend that is Gilbert Godfrey, probably the most recognizable voice in Hollywood. I think him and Rodney Dangerfield were two personalities that
Yeah.
stood out on their own. You knew who they were, even if you weren't familiar with them by a name recognition. But he passed at the age of 67, battled with muscular dystrophy. Very, very sad news. I think his most famous role for at least our generation was probably being in Aladdin.
Yeah, Iago.
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, the dude was absolutely hilarious. I don't think enough people really appreciated his work as a comedian because I think most of us knew him through his acting work. But his stand up was something very special, and like he has just some classic jokes that to this day, like I don't know if you've ever seen his aristocrats bit. Have you seen this? It's an
Mhm.
anti joke, like it's a comedian's joke, and he did it at a roast of Hugh Hefner. And in that roast, he makes a 9/11 joke. This was several months after 9/11, so it was still very recent. He was the first guy to go there and make that joke, cross that line, and people in the audience were like there was some audible boos and everything else. And so he dives into his rendition of the aristocrats, which is the dirtiest, messiest, completely not safe for work. Don't play it if you are in any kind of company, polite company. And by the end of it, I was roaring with laughter. Like the joke holds up, and it's just, and it's all in his delivery, right? Like what he's talking about and what he's describing in the joke and everything else is not that funny to begin with, but he's funny and just a true comedian, a true artist. Honestly, I think in everything he did, and it's a real shame what happened, and I think it's important that we acknowledge his passing, yeah, and give him his due and his credit for everything he contributed to
Yeah.
comedy, to a lot of our childhoods, yeah, to entertainment as a whole.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, he is funny, and that was him. You heard the voice. I mean, the Affleck, like it would make you chuckle every time you just heard, and that was his natural voice,
Yeah,
which is like just crazy. But
it's crazy. I mean, like he
no,
did so many things in entertainment, right? Like we mentioned Aladdin, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He was in Superman series, Fairly Odd Parents, SpongeBob, Ren and Stimpy, Duckman, and these are just the animated things, right? Like he was in live action SNL stuff, Beverly Hills Cops 2, I think it was. Like, and again, that's not even appreciating his
problem
actual
child too. Yeah.
comedy, like his stand-up comedy that he did, which was just like phenomenal. The guy was an incredible legend, and the world is a sadder place losing him. So look to the future a little bit. So give me something good.
Over the weekend, Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer was announced and dropped. For those of you unfamiliar, pretty popular franchise. Originally came out on the PlayStation, and basically Square Enix mashing up with Disney. So it's kind of Final Fantasy meets Disney is the best way to kind of put it. And I mean, fourth installment, I think the fan base has always continued to grow, and I think it brought a lot of fans that weren't fans of Final Fantasy into the JRPG genre in quite a few ways. But what's your reaction to the announcement and to the trailer? Because the trailer is pretty unique.
So the trailer, I will say, the game looks absolutely gorgeous. It's demonstrating some kind of like parkour stuff moving through this urban environment. That looks really fun and cool if they can do it right. A lot of games have tried to include parkour as like it's kind of like movement style, and they've been, some games have really hit it out of the park, and some games have really flopped on that. So, when games get it right, it really does add, I think, a good dimension to games in terms of verticality, and the way you move through environments becomes much more creative than just like walking around barriers that are more or less believable depending on the game. You know what I mean? And invisible walls and
Mhm.
stuff. So that looked really cool. The visual style looked really neat. Some people had concerns about that. I think there was already a tweet release basically saying that the reason he looks different is because this is set in a different world, and that has affected his appearance. So they've already accounted for that basically. And overall, it looks really, really, really nice. Hopefully, the gameplay is as nice as the trailer, because every once in a while we do get those trailers that are great works of art, Photoshop, right? Like these are rendered things; these are not actually gameplay footage. With that said, Kingdom Hearts as a franchise, I really hope they find a good narrative. I did play Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, and those were pretty, I think, well fit together. And then it branched out into mobile games and spin-offs, and then 3 came along, and the story just got really, I think it lost its way narratively speaking. You know what I mean? Like I think it turned into a
Yeah.
real mess. So as much as I really, really liked the first 2 games, after that, my energy for the franchises in general very much dissipated, and I'm hoping they bring it back with this latest installment.
No, I'm with you there. I mean, I think the last one I played was, I guess, 2.5. It wasn't 3. It was on the 3DS, and I maybe got a third of the way through. It didn't keep my attention. Gameplay mechanics were kind of wonky, and I was just like, yeah. But I mean, the first one, phenomenal. I think the Sephiroth boss fight is still arguably one of the hardest boss fights ever. I mean,
I
once you
still
know what to
remember that
kind of do,
actually.
it's
Yeah.
it's not as hard, but definitely, when you're playing as 10, 12-year old, it is excruciating.
I mean,
But
it ruined
graphic.
Final Fantasy VII for me, you know. It really did. So we've had this conversation before about like why I've never played original Final Fantasy VII, because, and I said part of the issue is the graphics. And part of that is because my first introduction to all of those characters was their incarnation in the Kingdom Hearts franchise. So I
Yeah.
assumed that and I don't know why I assumed this, but like the characters that I saw in Kingdom Hearts were going to be the characters I saw playing Final Fantasy. And then you get the
I mean, it
pixels
wasn't.
and
Yeah, it
and
wasn't
and
that far off too. I mean, because what Kingdom Hearts came out in what 2000, 2001, maybe. So I mean, it's only 4 years difference. Final Fantasy VII came out in '97, so it really wasn't far off. But I mean, speaking of graphics though, and you already mentioned it, this game does look smooth. I mean, the trailer, it looks just very nice. You mentioned too the game mechanics, also very fluid, very smooth. It just seems to work. Like I think it's a game. If it looks like this in the trailer all the way through, I think it's going to be a game that will have a lot of success streaming, honestly, because it just looked like a joy just to watch, especially if you can hit those transitions perfectly. And combat is going to be that fluid and not as much hack and slash as we've seen in Final Fantasy 15, which, take it or leave it kind of thing. I think you either like it or not. Final Fantasy 7 Remake did a much better job balancing it, I felt like.
yeah, and you're right. I mean, it was like a 97 2002 release difference. It wasn't that big. I guess Final Fantasy suffered from the hardware it was released on. I don't know.
But that might have been, yeah.
Um
I mean, Kingdom Hearts might have been PS2 then. I think about it.
yeah, I mean, and maybe that was the key difference, is like it was on higher power hardware, so like it was able to actually perform better. I don't know. But like Final Fantasy 2 did not, or I'm sorry, Final Fantasy 7 did not look nearly as good as the Kingdom Hearts release did. But speaking of things, how do you like this transition? Speaking of things not looking so good, World of Warcraft has finally finished up Sylvanas' storyline, and I'm gonna be honest with you, it fucking sucks. It should come as no surprise to anybody who's been following the story through the ages. Sylvanas as a character has been there since Warcraft 3, before the franchise transitioned to the infamous World of Warcraft online RPG. And her character was a very tragic one. She was corrupted, killed, brought back, undead, broke free, reclaimed some, she reclaimed her freedom mentally. She was no longer enslaved to the Lich King. And so a very interesting kind of dark character. And so she had some good potential, right? And then as World of Warcraft has kind of gone on, I think they've occasionally trotted out big names to sort of reinvigorate interest in the franchise and the series. Illidan being one of those guys who just seems to pop up every time things start getting a little messy and people lose interest. Illidan's there because he's a cool dude. I don't know, super edgy. And so they made Sylvanas this super edgy person, and she goes on to just commit genocide. She takes over as leader of the Horde, commits genocide, and she's doing all these like just horrible, horrible things. And I guess the whole reason was because she died, went to hell, came back, realized how shitty of a place hell was, and somehow everything she did up until that point was to fight against the afterlife. I say that with trepidation because I don't think it really makes sense. It sounds like a lot of like we're trying to force you to see this as a gray character, as a redeemed character, as a someone who makes sense. And I don't think she does. Like I don't think any of this actually works to justify her actions. I mean, what did you think when you read her story?
You lost me at trepidation.
I'll keep them.
I don't know what that word. I don't know what that word means. Yeah, I read it for a living. It's over my head. I mean, no, me not playing. I have an odd kind of take because it's like I didn't play WoW. I wasn't invested necessarily in the storylines. Like I couldn't tell you what the storylines were. All I knew was that the enemy figure on each basic edition was a new, I guess, main villain. So it's kind of like for you, I guess it's more questions for you as far as do any of the expansion packs really keep your interest, or is the lore that intense to where people really do follow along? And even with this, like with the book coming out, then do people stay that in tune with it and follow through with it?
So I think World of Warcraft lore is a huge thing that has a cult following. And I say that in the sense of like very devoted fan following. I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean that there are people who are super, super fans of WoW lore. So there's a lot of people who play, definitely click through the quest, don't read the text, and just sort of go here, go there, do what they got to do, and they get through it. And they have some understanding of the larger storyline and narratives going on, but they're not like super in tune with it. And then you have the people who really do go all in consuming. There's comics, there's books, there's all kinds of other media that's related and kind of like supporting the narrative that you see in the games. And there's people who get really, really into that. And I think the big issue that they've run into for several expansions, honestly, is the desire to keep the two factions opposed. And that made sense way back when the game started because the whole thing was basically this idea of other, right? You had the human alliance with the elves and all the pretty races essentially, and then you had the horde, which was the orcs and the Tauren and the kind of like the beast peoples going on, and like the undead ended up in there as well. And so this idea of like you have these two groups that are very different on the outside, but on the inside aren't so different. And so then we get to World of Warcraft and we do a lot of storylines where like we end up teaming up, we take down bad guys together, we fight on the same side of things, our leaders are sort of getting along. There was this weird sort of love thing between Janna Proudmoore, the mage of the Human Alliance, human mage, and Thrall, the war chief. Was he war chief? I think he was war chief for a while, but shaman of the Horde, orc shaman. You have this human orc love thing going on, and they had to manufacture a reason for them to hate each other again. That's what keeps happening, is like it feels manufactured at this point. Like you've established very much that like, hey, we're not so different on the inside. Like appearances outside being what they are might seem that way. We're not that different. And then Sylvanas, I think, was meant to be this character because you couldn't hate the Horde as a whole anymore. Like we got past that storyline. We did that storyline. You couldn't just have the humans thinking all the Horde were horrible. And so they made Sylvanas utterly, utterly horrible and hateable to the point that like, yeah, now the Alliance hates the Horde again because they're holding them accountable for all of her literal war crimes. But then they're still trying to do that thing of like, oh, but this is a gray hero. Like she's actually not a bad person. And it just feels like you're going through a lot of narrative hoops.
Did they shoot themselves in the foot then? Because I guess for
think
me,
so.
Like when I played WoW, like even with the raids, it was like I didn't really know who the main baddie was. So I guess with Sylvanas, it's like, you're aware of it. Did it deteriorate more the gameplay, or did her story really make you want to play and feel like, hey, if we defeat them, like,
I really think it had the reverse effect. Like, I really think it turned players off to wanting to continue the game because, like, if you were playing a Horde character, you were part of her war crimes, right? Like, you were
a heavy burden, yeah.
and a lot of players were like, no, this is not the narrative I've been building this entire time. My character is a hero in this world. They do heroic things. They save the world. Like, I'm not an evil person is not like the headcanon narrative. And there is like the official storyline too, right? Like when you fight things or do things, there is sort of like an official story of heroes of the Horde and Alliance and da 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 da. So like there is like that narrative as well. Obviously, you got to put a face on those narratives, so you use these kind of figure pieces like Sylvanas as the face of a story. But the players are very much part of the actual narrative that gets built and gets created as you play through this stuff. And I think a lot of people were lost on this narrative in terms of what was going on, why it was going on, why they were being forced to do these things. And then you get to the end of this, and I think the payoff was not worth it. You know, like a lot of the story was based around her brother, who was not a major issue in her story until literally the end of this expansion, after she's been shitty for the past like 3 at least. And it's just, you know, it seems like a lot of, it's not hard retconning, you know what I mean? Because it's not like it's actually contradicting itself anywhere, but it's definitely soft retconning in the sense of it's subverting what we thought we understood and presenting like, oh, but you didn't know. It's Han crawling out of the crash. You know what I mean? Like, it's the Fast and Furious. Han dies in a car crash, but actually he crawled out. You didn't see that. So is it a hard retcon? No, but it was strongly implied he was dead. Same thing with Sylvanas. Like, we had an idea of her character, and they just kind of went a different way with it.
So speaking of writing and bad writing, I think it's a lack thereof.
Yeah.
I'll let you take it. This is, I know, another topic that's close to you.
I mean, it's one of those things that bothers me a lot. We've talked about this on the podcast before. J.K. Rowling has some very interesting views on trans people specifically. She seems, you know, largely okay with gay representation and stuff like that in her works, and that interpretation of her characters. And so a long time ago, she said, confirming like a fan theory, that Albus Dumbledore was gay. And actually, he had a physical and emotional attraction relationship with Grindelwald, the evil wizard. And so that was a kind of a tragic backstory, because Dumbledore was the one who had hunted him down and eventually had him committed to the wizard prison. And this was ages ago that she confirmed this fan theory, which was, I mean, kind of weird at the time, because it was essentially a fan fiction that she was just like, yeah, sure, like, Dumbledore is gay, like, why not? You know, it's the wizarding world of Harry Potter. You can be anything, like, it doesn't matter. Which is cool on the one hand. On the other hand, it's like, okay, if you're going to say that, back that up. And she's been kind of promising all along that they were going to touch on that subject in the Fantastic Beast franchise, which is following some of the history of Dumbledore. And this one, the newest installment, is called The Secrets of Dumbledore. So, you know, really thought when we did Crimes of Grindelwald, it would be established in there, the previous movie. Secrets of Dumbledore, I mean, if this isn't a secret that he's got a relationship with a dark wizard, you think it would come out in here. But they released the movie in China, and they edited out all the gay references that were in it, which made the film a whole 6 seconds shorter. So, like,
yeah.
Come on, JK. Like, Joanne, what are you doing? What are you doing?
That's what made me laugh. I mean, shame on China. It's like 6 seconds. Like, come on. That's even by the communist rule there. You know, I don't think 6 seconds is gonna be that detrimental. So that's shame on them for that. But 2, on J.K. Rowling's part, yeah, I'm with you. Also, with the titles, you know, of kind of Secrets of Dumbledore and the Crimes of Griswold, it screams sodomy to me. So I feel like there's a lot of room to just, you know, really, really flow with it. What's his name? Christ, I forget the actor. Who plays Johnny Depp as Mads Mikkelsen.
Yes, Mads Mikkelsen.
From he was in what, Rogue One. He played Polar as well. He was in the first James Bond.
Oh my God, he was in all kinds of movies.
Royale. He's also in another Norwegian film, I think. It's just him and a bunch of teachers try to stay drunk.
I mean, he was Doctor Strange. He was Caecilius in Doctor Strange. People might know him from Three Musketeers.
Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
So, but he replaced Johnny Depp because the Amber Heard Johnny Depp stuff.
Yeah,
and
that mess.
I guess with maybe some of the romance scenes, I could see that maybe having to cut things out because of that actor change, but still to only have 6 seconds of references to anything. And I haven't seen the films to know if they've even alluded to any sort of tension. It does just seem kind of like a J.K. Rowling being J.K. Rowling, of not really putting any money where her mouth is.
Yeah, because like it seemed like she was fine with confirming and sort of accepting these fan theories originally, and I think that was important for a lot of people who were looking for validation and were looking for, just acceptance of who they were, and the idea of this magical world where you have people who can change their shape and their appearance and all this stuff of like you've really divorced people on the inside from sort of their physical presentation on the outside. And I think that was really attractive to a lot of people for a lot of reasons, not just those in the LGBT community, but a lot of people who just felt like who they were, who they imagined themselves to be in their head was not how they were seen by the world. And I think that's a powerful message and a good message. And JK in the beginning, Joanne was like all about that, right? But she never backed it up in any of her works, right? Like this is all like people reading between the lines and sort of interpreting things in their own way to fit their own fashion. And JK being like, sure, yes, that's true, and like whatever. But now that she's got the opportunity to actually confirm that and be inclusive in the media she's producing or that she's, part of, she's declined to do it. And that
Yeah.
just shows that this is all lip service. Like, what the heck?
Annoying part to me, at least with JK, is it is all just disingenuous. Of like you created this world, and even if it was just by indirect and circumstance, and people are like, oh my god, thank you for creating a world where I felt accepted, which is a lot of fandom. I know a lot of Harry Potter fans that that was a big kind of wake up call for them, and just as far as their geekdom, or like it was just a safe spot to where they felt accepted, and the friends that they shared and the all love and affection for the storyline and the characters, absolutely. But for her to constantly just be like, yeah, and then also say yeah, and then not play into it and actually give it an actual mouthpiece. It's just disingenuous. And I think that's like J.K. Rowling just constantly just gets, beat up on socials because of that. But in a lot of ways, rightfully so, because she really hasn't tried to actually be
Yeah.
inclusive with it.
Because I'm personally of the opinion with a lot of this stuff, like we can question motivations of companies, especially for being inclusive and being more representative and stuff like that. And if they're doing that because they genuinely believe in those values or because it's the thing to do and it's a money grab and they're paying lip service to it. But like there's no harm even if their intentions are impure. Right? Like even if they're doing it for the money, no one's going to be hurt by being more inclusive, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
The issue with J.K. Rowling is like she was very happy to accept all this fame and all and this and kind of like it wasn't in the book, but like it could have been kind of deals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you're just lying. Like this isn't like a case of insincerity. This is just lying to people about where you stand on these issues because you've had multiple opportunities now to tell the story that you said was a thing. Like in your personal canon, this was like a true story, not in any published media, and you haven't.
I think we have to get J.K. Rowling on the show and just have a roundtable.
Really,
I
just
think,
tear her down. Oh man.
I have to send her people an email. I'm pretty sure her and Frost have the same agent, I'm sure.
I know. Who'd be interesting to talk about it is ContraPoints did a whole thing about her trans views and stuff like that. And that is, if no one's seen the ContraPoints video, free. I have no association with the channel of the person and behind it or whatever, but like that was a very interesting and illuminating video that might help inform you on the situation a little bit. But let's get over to something different, please.
Yes. Still talking a little bit, I guess, the inclusiveness if you actually played the game. But Abe's Odyssey came back out. This is actually original PlayStation game. One I remember having on the original PlayStation. Abe's Odyssey back in was at 97, 98. No, 98.
Okay.
Phenomenal platformer. Basically works at a meat factory, and his people are getting turned into the meat that they love, and it's pretty jacked up. The whole point of the game is to basically escape from the meat factory and also save your people who happen to be workers. It's pretty warped and mussed up, but it's a phenomenal platformer. The latest edition came out on the PS5, Oddworld Soulstorm, and I believe it's the fourth iteration of the franchise, if I'm not mistaken. But the developer and the founder of Abe's Odyssey, he was not too happy about it. He basically said it was devastating for them. Came out as a free game, April 2021 on the PlayStation Plus. Supposed to launch in January. End up coming out in April as well when it was set for the free game. Couldn't change the contract. The agreement with PlayStation was already in place, so they couldn't do anything about that. They were expecting to basically have 50 to 100,000 free downloads. And this is already with the game already being in circulation for 3 months prior. It ended up being downloaded 4 million times.
Yeah.
So that's
What an incredible number. I mean, on the
yeah.
one
So
hand, it's great that people love their game, and it is, I think, the sixth in the franchise. I'm doing some fact checking as we're going along here, and it seems like they were called the Mudokons or something, the name of the species. Um,
you could also fart in the game too, which is hilarious.
really, could you? That's
It's carried over
hilarious.
in all the games. Yeah,
That's great. But yeah, I mean, I guess the question kind of is like, is this fair? Essentially, you know what I mean? Like they signed the contract, and it seems if you read some story behind that, one, the games that come out on PS Plus, we know that there's some sort of flat fee paid to the developers to publish on there, and then people get free downloads. Two, while it has 4 million downloads, it'll be interesting to see how many people keep the games. Um, because one of the benefits of PS Plus is because it's free to download, like those are games that you might not ultimately buy. You know what I mean? So how many people who downloaded the game would have been actual purchases is hard to say. But
exactly.
again, when your number is 4 million downloads versus an expected 100,000, I mean, you're expecting a lot more sales than what you were guessing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
it's like 400% more.
yeah, yeah. And at the time that the deal was negotiated, the developer was running out of money, and so they needed an infusion of cash. And so it seemed like not that they were under duress, but Sony definitely was in a strong negotiating position because they needed money to finish the game. They took the deal. And then the game goes on to, 4 million downloads. It could have been maybe a big revenues generator for the developer and everything else. They missed out on that. And I think it brings us to the question of, are these sort of Game Pass deals, PS Plus, Xbox, are these good things for the industry? Because I think they're great for consumers, but how are they what's the effect on the industry overall when we're talking about
Yeah,
people potentially losing profits?
I don't know what PlayStation, pays, and we don't have those figures to what Soulstorm was with that agreement. Same thing with Xbox on Game Pass as well. We've heard from indie developers that basically puts them over the edge and makes it worthwhile, but we haven't really seen a game come out like this. I think even within 3 months' time, that seemed pretty early to me to kind of be a free game already anyway. But with indie games and platformers, it is a very niche market. So again, if you're benching on those
I mean,
niche
I
fans
think
that
they
come
actually
out,
released in April. Like, I don't think it was just that
but
the
that's
PlayStation
what.
Plus release was delayed. I think the whole thing was delayed
So well, no, the PlayStation Plus was supposed to come out. It was
in
basically
January.
April. So
Okay,
if the game wasn't ready, it wasn't ready. But the game wasn't
gotcha.
ready until April. So they couldn't sit there and say, let's bump back PlayStation Plus another 3 months. The agreement was thing, the game was ready. Everything was already set in stone for the agreement. If it was a playable game, it's coming out as a free game on PlayStation. So that's what hurt them having to push back with COVID and delays and everything else on the January launch. I think though with indie games like this and platforms especially, you have that niche market. So you have a feverish fan base that's going to buy it. And ultimately, yeah, they're going to be benching on that for profit. And then you're either going to see, an uptick in new fans, or you can add DLC to kind of cook everybody's on there 3 months down the road. But having it all at once, yeah, I can't. I can understand why that just killed the game. I mean, think about if Wonderlands, you and I've been playing that,
Oh God,
crap
yeah.
ton since it came out. If that was a free game this month, you and I both would have jumped on it, wouldn't have thought twice about it. Maybe we would have got the season pass, but that's what then? $50 versus,
30.
what? Yeah.
That's a $30 deal. Yeah, versus I think it was $60 for the base game, not counting the pass, which would be an additional either 20 if you bought it as a package or 30 separately. Um, yeah, and I don't know, it's an interesting situation because it's in my head. This reminds me a lot of what happened with the Witcher franchise in the sense that the author wrote the books, made his money, didn't really expect the games to be a big thing, and obviously they went on to huge critical and financial success with the game releases. And the guy felt like he got cheated basically because he sold them like the game rights relatively cheap because he misjudged the market. And that's kind of, I guess, what happened in this situation as well, that like they sold the release of the game and everything else. They got their upfront money, misjudging how many people would be interested in playing the game. And to be fair, I think platformers as a genre are less big than they used to be. So I think maybe those numbers, their projections were probably realistic at the time. And I don't know what happened that they saw this many downloads or what's going on per se that they got 4 million. But like I said, I think it kind of brings up the question a little bit of like, are they entitled, are any developers entitled or publishers entitled to some cut of the profits based on their sales? Like, hey, here's an upfront cost for X number of downloads. If we exceed those, do you start getting additional kickbacks? Because in the end, this is a great deal for PS Plus as like Sony as a company, because this is why people will subscribe. If you have games that are this popular and this downloaded, people will see the value in paying for PS Plus to get access to those games.
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I know.
We'll see.
So rarely.
We'll see what happens with it. I mean, I don't think unless another game has that kind of failed launch and miscue like that, we're going to see necessarily something like this. But it does beg the question: is it worthwhile to put your game on these subscription services?
Understanding
like
the risk of like you are basically betting against yourself, essentially, of like what could you sell it for on your own versus what you can sell it for the upfront cost and the free PS Plus release. You know what I mean? So you're betting against yourself. And I think in this case, it wasn't so much that as much as they needed money from somewhere. This was a good deal. And in defense of Sony, I haven't heard other creators making similar complaints. Like no one else has been grumpy with their releases. So this might just be, you know, a unique situation, a fringe case kind of deal, and maybe not worth the attention we're giving it. But I think it bears some consideration with the prevalence of Games Passes between Epic, Game Store. You see it on Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Direct stuff, or not Nintendo Direct, but they have their own download stuff going on now too. So I think it bears consideration as we move forward into the subscription model of gaming.
Speaking of subscription model and Epic as well.
That was a good setup.
Talking a little bit about the Metaverse.
Oh gosh.
Two portions here.
Yeah.
Sony and Lego both contributed $1 billion a piece to Epic Games in their Metaverse, which is insane amount.
Oh my
insane.
God.
$2 billion investment, just to think about that.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen the actual product yet. That's still just in development. And this is the second time Sony's actually donated. They donated $250 million previously. Now an additional $1 billion on top of that. I think it is kind of interesting to see Lego diving into this with the Metaverse. I mean, Lego games are very popular. Curious to see how that folds, but also you presented too before we started recording. Facebook, or the company now known as Meta, is going to be charging 50% for creators using their platform.
Yeah, and it seems like they're going to be taking a huge chunk of revenue for anything put on the platform. And like, for me, that by itself is really concerning because from what I can tell, one of two things is I can only think of like three things maybe. But two main ones come to mind. The first one is that this is like the new Theranos, right? Like if anyone remembers anything with Theranos, it was this medical startup company that was going to make these huge breakthroughs in at-home testing for medicine. And it was all based on a lie. I'm sorry?
You work for Hulu? Isn't that the
yeah, they did. They came out with the Hulu show.
Playing,
yes.
In the show. It's on Hulu right now.
It's playing Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah. You're right. Exactly. So if you haven't seen the show, it's interesting. It's definitely dramatized a little bit, but it's based on completely true events that Theranos was a company, startup, and like the person running it, Elizabeth Holmes, just flat out lied to people about what was going on, the progress of the technology, where they were at in development, and had tons of investment money in this for no reason at all, because she had no product to show. And she didn't even have expertise in the medical field. Like that wasn't what she studied. It was an insane thing when you look back on it, like how she got away with it so long with nothing to show for it. It's like the Fire Festival, all these people investing in that for nothing to show with the Fire Festival. And like, I can only imagine Metaverse is a similar crackpot of things going on. It's just, there's nothing going on there. It's all taking people, you know, unaware. They just don't realize that there's nothing there. And it's the Meta name, Facebook name or whatever that's got people convinced that this is whatever. The second thing I can think of as a possible, like what's going to happen is they're basically seeking to create like a dystopian cyberpunk society, right? Like when you see those movies of the future and you have ads that scan your eyes and change when you walk by and track your movement, and you've got this sort of like surveillance society and everything else, like they're essentially looking to create that experience where they're just massively and horribly invasively harvesting your data in mass quantities to
Yeah.
market to you, to sell to you, to keep you inside their bubble. Especially as I think lawmakers are becoming more aware of digital privacy laws and things are becoming more common with that. If everything is actually owned by the same entity, it would be very hard to say that what you do in, Epic Games and Facebook and such, like if it's all part of the metaverse umbrella, it'd be hard to say that they can't share that information internally within their own company structure. So it might even be a way to kind of get around those laws and things that are starting to appear as, more common data protection laws. So this whole thing for me is just a trip. Like, what are they doing? What do they think they're doing? And let's put it this way, Neil, would you ever invest in an idea like this? Like, let's just imagine for a second you had $1 billion, more than $1 billion, because you're not going to give all your $1 billion to one company.
The production value in the show would be a lot better. I'll tell you that.
First things first, invest in the show. But let's imagine you had this kind of money to give to a company. What would someone have to tell you to be like, yes, this is where I want to put my money?
In the metaverse specifically.
Yeah, like what would you have to hear about that to believe in that investment?
See, that's another question because I can see the future of metaverse and I get it. I'm also very anti-social media. Even as a journalist, I really think would all be better off without social media. And Elon Musk also putting up $43 million bid today too to buy Twitter is also, I think, alarming because I think he's also heavily involved with the idea of the metaverse as well. And I do think you hit the nail on the head a bit to where it creates this Orwellian vibe to where it is very much like Ready Player One, to where Facebook's version is using VR equipment to where you can basically then see products and interact and create your world. Epic, we haven't seen as much, but I imagine it's going to be kind of how Fortnite operates, to where you have your avatar and pretty much everything in that world is going to be malleable, very much like Minecraft. You see it, you can make it, you can mold it through your avatar. So similar concepts, but different. Is that level of immersion good? I don't think so. And I also, to your point, they're data mining you nonstop too. So then you introduce advertising into this bit, it's literally just going to be just that, to sell ads and pick up your habits. And I think we're already seeing it too in social media. At least I've noticed it in the last month and a half rapidly. The algorithms have gotten a lot more aggressive. I have to now search for people that are information I want to find. It's, if we're talking about F1 or whatnot or Wonderlands, it's been very narrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, so if it's gotten that narrow in just a couple months now since previous iterations, the metaverse is literally building a world around what you want. If we talk about echo chambers and issues, and even just in the sense of escapism and what you like to do and how you like to have fun, it's equally dangerous.
Yeah.
Because what's going to make you want to escape then if you're building a world for yourself outside of all this stuff?
Yeah. And it's actually, and like, so I want to bring in 2 points to this here that I think are interesting points for people to educate themselves, I think, on what this could look like in a bad way. The first one is a real world example brought from World of Warcraft. And basically the game, as it matured, got more and more systems in place to connect players with each other with like matchmaking systems, essentially. And while for a casual player, this was great because you did not have to have a dedicated guild or group or people to play with, real life friends, etc. It made it a lot easier to find people. It also ruined the game's sense of community. There's a big reason why there was a push for classic World of Warcraft, because the limitations on matchmaking, the limitations on group forming forced people to build communities in those games and connect. And I think, in the one sense, you could argue that, hey, technology is bringing people together. Yes. But coming back to your point of echo chambers, it also makes it really easy to sort of find your bubble and like go off and, and not play in the sandbox. Like what was important about World of Warcraft is you had to work with other players to achieve goals. That's not really anything that I'm hearing about what's coming out of Metaverse. You know what I mean? Like it's not designed in that fashion to like foster or even force cooperation. Everyone can just kind of like mess off.
Again, with Epic, the only thing I can really compare it to so far is what they've done with Fortnite, which is a bit more community and a bit more kind of like, okay, have fun and stuff too. But again, there's a lot of negatives with that. To the point with Facebook, though, on creative side of things, to them being a universe to where, we could log in create our own avatars to where, I could have a mustachio avatar for myself. Yeah, I mean, you could have, Harry Potter vibe and doing your thing, or go back to your old T-mode look.
True story.
So, but no, whatever the case may be, but then to have a half cut on whatever we do, and the basis is though too, we're still selling your product by using it, and also ads that basically any sort of ad and company you've already approved on top of that. What the fuck is the point for me then to be a creator on Facebook's Meta?
I mean, the obvious answer
Especially
is you're
like,
going to need the platform to have the audience. I mean, that's what it turns into a lot of these things. Like, why do people?
It's just crazy.
Why do people release games on DM's Guild, for example? Dungeons and Dragons, you can write and publish your own stories, or you can release on DM's Guild. DM's Guild takes a large portion of that. It's music releasing on various streaming platforms. Why do they do it? Because that's where the audience is. If people are using the metaverse, that's how you get to people.
Then too. Do you think Meta's decision for that is that so many streamers and content creators really don't know how to fucking build a brand or what they're actually doing? And it is just immediate audience, and you can just tap into basically low cut shirt if you're an e-girl, sex sells, or it is just kind of, shock streamers in a lot of ways too. And gamers that do just go for the shock value.
Because I think, well, here's I think kind of the dirty secret, not secret, maybe not even dirty, frankly, is like a lot of people who are moving into content creation are doing it in amateur fashion, which isn't necessarily by itself a problem, right? But it does mean that they don't know, like you said, like there's a lack of information or knowledge around avenues of growing a brand, making a brand. How do you do that? I'm not going to say being an e-girl isn't a brand. It absolutely is. They make money doing it, and some of them definitely do it better than others. Like there's some acumen, there's something there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the real issue is, especially with like what Metaverse is striving to do, is competition in the market. Because I think you see this a lot in all kinds of industries, and the first one that comes to my mind is like Amazon and booksellers, essentially. You know what I mean? Like you can self-publish on Amazon if you want to, which is great for some beginning authors to get out there, but there's a reason we had publishing houses and stuff like that, and we've gotten away from that. Amazon takes large cuts of profits for things that are sold on their storefronts, which it becomes a situation of like, okay, so either I have to agree to their terms to reach their audience and maybe even pay them extra for them to, prioritize my ads and stuff to people that I want to see my product. And now not only are they taking a large cut of my profits, I'm paying them on top of that to get that product shown to people, or I go it alone and I risk screaming into the void of the internet and not being heard, and I think it's a super predatory practice, and ultimately I think it hurts creators in a lot of ways. I don't think it's, lack of competition is bad is what it comes down to, you know what I mean? And they're really definitely trying to make an early move here towards, I think, this sort of technology we see in dystopian future sci-fi movies, essentially. They're like, hey, that's really what the world is going to look like at some point. The sooner we get moving on that technology, the better, because we tend to make more profits. Like, I legitimately believe that's the thought here. And it doesn't matter that all of those movies are dystopian. Like, there's supposed to be warnings about like what not to do, how society should not be, but they see the dollar signs, they're going for it, I think the other thing that I want to mention here was the data harvesting and tracking stuff. I mean, John Oliver just did a Last Week Tonight on data brokers and how much data is harvested. And you mentioned how you feel like a lot of your data is getting picked up. I mean, my concern with the metaverse is any laws that are made for data protection and privacy basically don't apply because everything's within their bubble.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't say, like, I agreed to play this game. Like, I agreed to play Fortnite, but I'm not down for whatever Facebook's offering or doing with my data. You know what I mean? You can't segment that.
Fortnite character, it basically asks you if you're okay with them data mining from jump. It's a big reason why I don't buy Fortnite and play it. Yeah. It was the only shooter on the Switch, and I was like, I'm not going to do this. You have to data mine me just to make a character. Like, it's crazy to me. That's insane.
I don't, and the thing is, like, I don't know what the solution is, and I don't think anyone really does, because we have grown so used to having these free services, free to play games,
even, a lot we don't
and stuff like that. Yeah. Like, Facebook is a free service, Twitter, Instagram, all the social media sites you want to talk about are free to us, the users, but we are not the consumers, right? Like they aren't making money from our interaction with their platform. They're making money from data they harvest from us to then sell.
See, I guess my point, and I'm not knocking streamers or anything else or e-girls that do that. I mean, again, I make fun of our production value of the show, and I, produce and edit it myself. So I mean, it is what it is. There's a lot of folks that do learn the fly and do actively. It is their full-time job, and you can see the progression get better. And hopefully, that's what we do with this show as well. I'm not knocking. It's more so again to the point of without formal education with it, it is a steep curve. And if, as you pointed out, you're locked in, that's the audience. I think it then creates two kind of the data mine. Then you kind of then just become a crony in a way. And I think that's maybe what they bench on because so many folks then, I think content creators are becoming somewhat of an NFL athlete, movie star synonym to it. People think they can become a TikTok or YouTube sensation overnight. And if you're charging 50% of the audience and you have the numbers to back it up and it's, hey, we have 80% of the metaverse audience, is going to create that sort of mentality. I think that's a dangerous thing because you have a lot, the younger generation that's so in tune with this and entwined with it. They don't have any idea that they're going into it for escapism and how to come back out of the reality. So I think there's a lot of dangers with it. I guess maybe I'm going too into the weeds with it, but there's so many red flags.
I think you have a lot of valid concerns though.
And again, it's a lot of too, I think lawmakers in the States, we don't talk about data mining enough either. So there's a whole generation doesn't get it, doesn't understand it, favors capitalism. So then you see the dollars coming in, they see that as a positive. And there's just so much happening so fast, we still don't quite understand it. And again, we also have a generation that's so in tune with it, doesn't understand the impacts that has though either. It's very dangerous all around. It concerns me.
What's the movie quote of isn't in Jurassic Park? They were so focused on if they could do it, they never stopped to think whether or not they should.
Yeah.
And it really kind of feels like that with the metaverse of like they're just going down this way because we've talked about all kinds of different concerns, and I think all of them are equally valid. Privacy concerns, competition concerns, sort of the social effect it has when you move to more digital platforms and you have these echo chambers that people can get into and basically escape interacting with people that they don't like. You know what I mean? Like someone comes into your virtual space, whatever that looks like, and is voicing a dissenting opinion. What are you going to do? You're just going to ban them. You know what I mean? Like that opinion is not going to be heard. And that has no bearing on the validity of it or not. But like end of the day, we all got to live in the world together. We all got to somehow figure out how to communicate and get along. And if our default reaction is to just like block and ban things that we don't want to see and hear, I think that causes some of the other issues we are seeing in the world today where people are becoming more extremist in their views in general and have trouble relating to each other. And I think Metaverse is only going to add to all of that. Not to mention, I think the technology itself is fundamentally flawed with the ideas that they're kind of purporting of like, oh, you acquired an item in Fortnite and then you can take that to a different game and use it there. Or now you can set it up in your house. Like now you've unlocked this thing and it becomes part of your virtual space. Like what the heck's that?
I think this conversation is a perfect segue to the NFT argument and discussion we definitely have to do because I do think NFTs will play a big role in this. And again, why I'm worried about the Elon Musk news, and he's also a big fan of NFTs. And he clearly sees something in Twitter. I think he wants to entwine with it. You don't get involved to make a bid on that. With that, so I'm going off topic, but I think the metaverse. My point is the metaverse and NFTs. There's going to be direct connection there.
Oh, absolutely. And even to your point with Elon, I think it's a lot about controlling the narrative. Like Twitter is not very forgiving of Elon's shit because he does have shit and it does stink, people, in case you didn't know. And some people seem to revere him as this tech god genius. Like
he's been found to have bots on Twitter though too, that just support. I mean, everybody has
that report like his flights and stuff like that. And there's stuff like, and like I really think that his attempt to acquire Twitter is in part motivated by a desire to quell the sort of discussion that's happening around him and about him, that he can keep it in a favorable light, which comes back to, who's controlling the narrative and what we see and what we hear. And comes back to Metaverse again, being a social platform, and then how all those people will be talking and communicating with each other and what we see and what we hear.
I feel so bad for his kid. I honestly, if I could build a time machine,
oh no,
for actual use, I'd just go back to like 1940s, 1950s. I should say 1950s after World War II, California, and just buy like 40 acres of land and sit on it and be like, yep, families, boom, generational wealth, here we go, good to fucking go. But to go in the future, I would go to Elon Musk's kids, like first class with
What's
first
his
grade
name?
teacher trying to
Xylophone?
pronounce that fucking name. Yeah, I would just crack up laughing. A first grade teacher being like C3POWD40. Like, what the fuck is this?
Oh man, I mean, I feel terrible making because like no hate for the child, but guys, like
Yeah,
Elon Grimes,
yeah.
what the fuck were you
Why would you
thinking?
do that to your kid?
That's
It's like, come
horrible.
on. Yeah,
That is
that's
just
a terrible
horrible.
practical joke. Yeah.
It's not. It's not even funny. It's not a practical. It's not like the kid's gonna have to go through life with that name, and no one's going to use their actual name, so he's gonna come up with some sort of pseudonym.
But how do you even make a nickname out of that? Do you just call yourself what, 1 and 0? Like Christ.
I don't know, man. I feel so bad for the kid that he's gonna have to run through life with that name and with his parents. But like, I mean, Grimes for her part, I don't know nearly as much about her as Elon. She definitely seems like somebody who, as an artist, as a creative type person, she's sometimes gets off in the weeds, so to speak, with her stuff. But at the same time, like she left Elon, so like she's got some level of rational thought going on in there. Like I give her some credit for that. That she was able to look at the situation and be like, hey, this is not like what I want to be in, and step back from that, like regardless of the wealth the man has. You know what I mean? Like she was able to look at that and be like, nope.
Yeah. No,
So
boys and
some
girls,
credit
tune in
there.
next week for the Elon Musk hate hour.
Oh man, I mean that man. But no, we've definitely waxed pretty long on the topic. Metaverse overall, I think, is a concerning thing it should be a concerning thing for a lot of people because it is attracting such a big money. There are definitely people who see value in this for various reasons. I think it's a concern that we don't know what product they're actually trying to push or put out in the end. We have our ideas. We've talked about some of those ideas, but no one's seen a final product or demo of anything. So we don't know. But some very important people, some very rich people obviously believe in whatever this is enough to invest literally billions of dollars. And if that's not big news for everybody to pay attention to what's going on, I don't know what is. And so on that very bleak note, I think that's what we're going to call it for this week's episode of Spectator Mode.